Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Academy. I'm Graham Richmond and I'm with Alex Brown. This lesson is about defining your career goals. Alex, I know we're both pretty passionate about this, and I know that most MBA programs are pretty passionate about understanding what someone wants to do after the degree. And it does sound odd. I mean, I think for someone just approaching the MBA admissions process, they're often very focused on getting into school, and they're not necessarily thinking about what they want to do after school. And I remember just personally, I was really surprised that Wharton and all the other schools were asking me, what am I going to do when I graduate? What about 5 years after that, long term, et cetera? So why do these goals matter to the schools, and why are they such a big part?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because it is a bit of a hypothetical, right?
Right.
It's like we're talking about predicting the future rather than what you've actually done, and so on and so forth. So why do they matter? If you go to an MBA program, and we can use any of the examples out of the top tier programs that we tend to focus upon, there's just so much opportunity to do so much stuff on campus and so on and so forth. So if you don't arrive with a plan, I treat the plan as that sort of that guide, that rudder that makes sure you steer through the program in a very effective manner. So that you take advantage of the right career resources, you take advantage of the right extracurricular activities, and you meet and hang out with the right folks that you want to network with, and so on and so forth. So if you don't know what if you're waffling a bit on your plan, you're really not going to make the most of your MBA experience.
Yeah, and I think schools are concerned about that. They want you to come in knowing more or less. Obviously, everyone knows that what you write in your essays may shift, and that's not a problem. But they just feel like when a candidate comes into a program knowing more or less what they want to do, they can get more out of the program.
And I would argue on that point, Graham, if you come to a program with a well-developed plan, and as you suggest, plenty of folks do shift their plan in the program, but if you've spent a long time developing that plan, when you make that shift, it'll be a much more deliberate shift.
Yeah, you'll have experience, and I think it's almost like an exercise in defining your goals. You're going to get that gets you a lot of the way there, even if those goals ultimately shift. I think you're also trying to convince the schools that that you're going to land on your feet as well. So, we talk a lot about goals. Let's get into it. Like what makes a set of career goals? I mean, we talk about certain characteristics, like they need to be well defined. That's the first thing, right?
They need to be well defined. And quite frankly, what does that do? That helps you find the right programs that you're targeting, because not all programs are great for all careers and all geographies. We talk about that in different lessons, right? So it'll help you with your school selection. It helps tell the schools that you know that they're the right school for you. So you've done the research, and schools like to know that too. But well-defined is number one in terms of the characteristics of good goals. They've got to be well-defined.
Right, and I would say when we say well-defined, we mean you need to have an industry and a function.
Yeah.
So if you want to be, working in as an investment banker in finance, right? So and there's a multitude of possibilities that people
product manager at Amazon or something like that.
So knowing what you want to do and in what industry is important. I think some schools also want to know short and long term.
Correct.
So you might say, I want to do consulting for McKinsey. You should familiarize yourself with what's the role right out of business school. It's probably an associate, or they all have different names for the same thing. And then after that, you might say, in the longer term, ideally, I would focus my McKinsey strategy consulting work maybe in healthcare, and I would love to join a Fortune 500 healthcare company in a strategic role. Yeah. So knowing that and those steps, and again, it varies. Some schools don't ask at all about the very long term, and they focus just on the short. There's some schools, MIT Sloan is one, that say, we don't care about your goals at all. We don't. It's all.
I'm not sure I totally believe that sentiment. They might not ask explicitly.
Right. And they would argue, as you said, it's a bit of a crystal ball gazing, and they're focused more on your past actions. But for the most part, schools are asking for a set of goals.
But even the schools that only ask for your short-term goal, what is your short-term goal? It's a stepping stone to that long-term goal. So it's still useful, clearly, to be able to articulate that long-term goal in order to justify that short-term goal. So you need to know both, regardless of whether the schools are asking directly or not asking directly. And they can be asking in data forms, they could be asking in your essays, or it could be in the interview, it could be in all three.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, be wary that you might get asked about your goals in all these different facets of the process. But going back to the goals themselves, there are a few other characteristics.
So we talk about being well defined. They need to be feasible, ambitious, and impactful in my mind for ideal goals. So in terms of feasibility, it's looking at your profile, your background, what the school can do to sort of further develop your profile and experiences. Is that short-term goal feasible? Is that school able to help you recruit into that short-term goal? As an example, based on your background. So feasibility is going to be important. Also ambition, and you could argue maybe there, either ends of a spectrum. Feasibility is potentially less ambitious, but the point is ambition is important. You want folks that want to do stuff, or schools want folks that have a level of ambition, not just folks that are going to get the MBA, do well in the classroom, and then sort of check out on their career. They've got to be ambitious. And then that third component, feasibility, ambition, and impactful. That ambition, you want that targeted in an area that's going to have a wider impact. And I would argue the schools that you're applying to, read their mission statements. They basically are in the business of educating global leaders that are going to have impact in their communities and in their industries and whatever around the world. So you want to read those mission statements so that you can sort of develop your goal focus to say, you know what, I'm going to really fit into your community.
Yeah, and I would argue the one that always jumps out at me is this feasibility bit, because you often see candidates coming through the process who, let's say you're a computer programmer, kind of buried in a back office somewhere, not doing a lot of public-facing leadership stuff, and your career goal is you want to be a venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah. And
it's really hard to connect those dots, right? Yeah. And so especially if you'd had no kind of finance background or training and so I think that's what we mean by feasibility. The goals need to be logical. And so it could be that, there's maybe a longer path to get to venture capital eventually. Maybe you want to start a company, sell it, and then, eventually invest in others' companies. But you've got to have a kind of reasonable, feasible kind of pathway. And, I agree, these programs are looking for, I hate to say it, but they're looking to build a roster of people that are going to go out into the world and make them look good.
Yeah.
And so that's where the ambition comes in. That's where the impact comes in. And so it's not enough to just sort of say, yeah, I want to go work at McKinsey, make a lot of money, and settle down. That's you've got to have some additional, things to offer. But I think this is a great, obviously we've got all these different pieces here. Schools are asking, as you said, in the interview, in the data forms, sometimes in the essays. It varies school to school, but it's really important to spend some time thinking about what you want to do. And as you said earlier, it'll drive your school selection ultimately too, because some schools are better than others in various domains. So anything else, Alex, on this one?
No, I think that's great.
All right. So next up, we're going to get into a lesson on understanding your admissions reader.